written by Melanie Henry and Kenneth Copeland Ministries' Believer's Voice of Victory magazine, entitled Delivered from Death. Melanie writes, "The shrill jangle of the telephone pierced the silence, and Barry's brow furrowed at the sound. Walking toward the phone, he paused when his wife Shirley answered it. Her face looked stricken. She glanced at him, reproach in her eyes. Slipping out of the house, Barry drove to his automotive business, where he shut himself in his office. Dropping into his desk chair, Barry let his head fall into his hands. How had this happened? He tried to protect Shirley from the ongoing stress of their finances, but the problems had just come home to roost. Creditors called the house day and night. "Lord, I'm a hard worker," he prayed, and he whispered it in his own defense. It was true. He worked hard running his business. He'd heard about some business opportunities and had made some money. Encouraged, he'd borrowed money to invest more. But somehow, over the years, he dug himself into a financial hole and just didn't know how to climb out. Shirley had no idea that everything they owned was hot. They were $250,000 in debt and on the verge of bankruptcy. The thought of losing their home made Barry feel weak-kneed. He could not imagine looking into the eyes of his wife and 4 children and telling them that they'd lost everything. But that wasn't the worst of it. Barry knew he'd lost his wife's respect. Now, house or no house, he thought there was a good chance he might lose his family. "Shirley and I met as high school freshmen," he said, "and there was never anyone else for me. Shirley earned a teaching degree in home economics, and I started my own business. We were active in our church and taught Sunday school. And when our 4 children came along, she homeschooled them, and later we drove over 50 miles each way to a Christian school. While I trusted God for my salvation, I figured that I could handle everything else. But that wasn't working out so well. Back in the 90s, a friend gave us a set of tapes by Kenneth Copeland. They sat for a year until one day I listened to them in the car as I traveled. When I got home, I told Shirley, "Man, this is a whole new world." She listened to them and we wanted more. We became partners with KCM and learned about 2 Timothy 2:15, which says that we should study to show ourselves approved by God. Well, for the first time in my life, I started studying the Bible. We attended the Southwest Believers Convention each year, and we learned so much. And I just began to listen and absorb it, and I believed everything Kenneth Copeland taught, except about finances. I still thought that I could fix the problem. Well, one of the most profound changes in Shirley's life came as she read Gloria's book, To Know Him. In it, Gloria asked, what would we do if we got up one morning and found Jesus at the breakfast table? Would we take time to spend with him? Or would we say something like, "I'm thrilled you came by, but I have to run. I'm having lunch downtown and I have to go take care of some business. Maybe we'll have time to talk when I come home tonight." Well, from that time on, Shirley got up early and met Jesus at the breakfast table. She prayed and she read the Bible, making little index cards on verses that really stood out to her. She watched the daily Believer's Voice of Victory broadcast and incorporated the Copeland's literature in her homeschooling. And since she and Barry loved reading The Pursuit of His Presence and From Faith to Faith devotionals, Shirley included them in her curriculum as well. Once a month, when the Believer's Voice of Victory magazine arrived, Shirley would confess that she and Barry would someday be featured in that magazine and that our story won't be a tragedy. It will be, we heard the word, believed the word, obeyed, and were really blessed. Shirley endeavored to hear the voice of the Lord and obey. And at the grocery store one day, she made her selections with care, hoping that she wouldn't have to put anything back at the checkout. The quiet voice of the Lord interrupted her shopping. "Pay for what's in the basket in front of you." While approaching this checkout, Shirley noticed that the last woman in line had a huge basket of groceries. She swallowed hard, knowing she'd have to put her food back, but she was going to obey. At the last moment, an older woman slipped her basket in front of Shirley's. All she had were 2 cans of green beans. "I want to pay for those," Shirley said when the woman was about to pay. "I need those beans," the woman argued. "I don't want your beans. I just want to pay for them," Shirley said, handing the cashier the money. Well, when Shirley left the grocery store, the lady was waiting. "Why did you do that?" she asked Shirley. Shirley explained that the Lord had told her to pay for what was in her basket. "My husband died. the woman said with tears streaming down her face. This morning I told the Lord, you're going to have to show up today and let me know that you love me if you want me to go on living. Both women rejoiced at God's greatness. When we first started attending the conventions, 3 of our 4 children were too young for Super Kid Academy, Shirley recalls. So we sat in the nosebleed section, which is in the main auditorium, with pillows and blankets and snacks. We stayed in cheap motels, eating bologna sandwiches and cantaloupe. Well, when the children were old enough to attend Super Kid Academy, they were excited to go. And when they got too old, they volunteered as counselors, getting up at 6 a.m. to stand in line at the convention center. The word was changing everything in our lives except our finances. Creditors called day and night. My parents never had any debt, so it wasn't something I considered discussing before we were married. When we came home after our honeymoon, Barry joked that he only had $20 left in his pocket. I was shocked to discover that was all the money we had. There was no money in the bank and no savings. When creditors started hounding us, I realized we were in debt. But the worst part was Barry's secrecy. He wouldn't tell me what was going on. I felt unloved and it put a strain on our marriage. In 2004, when Barry realized they were on the brink of bankruptcy, their oldest son, Ben, was applying to colleges. There was no money to send him, so Barry applied for a loan. Sitting in his office one day, Barry read Romans 13:8. Owe no man anything but to love. Then he read Proverbs 22:7, which said, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Suddenly, Barry felt like a slave to debt. A few minutes later, his banker called. Barry, you're not going to believe this. I actually got your loan approved with your credit record. Conviction washed over Barry in waves. Thanks, he said, but I'm not going to take the loan. The banker, who knew the Sharps' financial situation, sighed. Your son won't go to college, he said. It looked that way. For the first time in my life, I prayed and turned the care of our finances over to God, Barry says. Then I made a vow to the Lord that I would never borrow another dime. I was determined to get settled on God's word and walk in his ways. The first thing Barry had to do was talk with Shirley. He had to be honest with her about the state of their finances and tell her about his vow to God. Then together, they would have to tell Ben that he would not be able to enroll in college. He was disappointed, but we were honest with him, and that helped him understand what we were up against. Barry said, I told him I would send him as soon as I could do it without debt. Ben got 2 part-time jobs to help with the finances. We'd always tithed, but I'd scraped anything off that I could, like tithing on the net instead of the gross, Barry recalled. Those days were over. We gave the full tithe and started giving, naming our seed we planted for our mortgage to be paid off and for the kids' educations and to be free from the bondage of debt. One of the things Barry had admired about Kenneth Copeland was that he was a pilot. Barry said, I dreamed of flying since a child. At age 21, I'd taken my first flying lesson and had been a student pilot off and on for many years. Now, I decided I was going to plant a seed for an airplane. I know there must have been a lag time, but it seemed as though everything just changed at once. I started getting calls to do big projects that I'd never done. More jobs and more money started coming in, and I got caught up on our house payments. Little by little, I started paying off debts. In addition to having more income, they stopped breaking. For example, one day Ben came home from work frustrated. Mom, he said, here are my paychecks from both jobs. That's not enough money to do anything. Well, what are you going to do? Shirley asked. The only thing I can do, I'm going to plant it and let it grow. Shirley and Barry rejoiced over Ben's decision. They had always believed children learn more from what their parents do than by what they say. They prayed and confessed that their children would never be caught in the bondage of debt, but they would live by God's principles. Shirley and Barry were seeing their seed take root and grow. Then in 2006, 2 years after Ben had planned to begin college, he moved to California and enrolled in the Los Angeles Film School. Barry paid cash for Ben's education. And when he graduated with a degree in production design, Ben didn't owe a cent. He was surprised at the number of graduating students who faced mountains of debt. In retrospect, the 2-year wait had been worth it. Within 6 years of Barry committing their finances to God and putting the brakes on debt, the Sharps had paid off all their debts, including their mortgage. They were debt-free and stress-free. Meanwhile, Barry had gotten his pilot's license. Now, He paid cash for a Cessna 172 airplane. In 2015, having become instrument rated, Barry paid cash for a Piper Comanche 260B. When Barry was 16, he went to church camp and gave away his car in an offering. Shirley explains, during our married life, a harvest of many cars has come to us as a result of that seed. So in addition to Barry's 2 airplanes, his hangar is home to an old Cadillac, 2 Corvettes, a Camaro convertible, a TR3 Triumph Roadster, and a motorcycle. When his hangar became so full that something had to go, he sold his Cessna. Barry has become an excellent businessman and won my respect. These days, Barry and Shirley Sharp fly to Fort Worth for the Believers Convention in their own plane and stay in a nice hotel. When their adult children now, none of whom have debt, by the way, join them there, they often tease their mom saying, "Mom, this just doesn't seem like convention. Our room doesn't smell like bologna and cantaloupe." Well, we got tired of milkshake religion and living under the bondage of debt, says Barry. Partnership with Kenneth Copeland Ministries and obedience to God's word freed us from both. When we started living the word that says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you," our whole world changed. And we truly are blessed in everything we do. The blessing of the Lord has made us rich. To partner with KCM or subscribe to their free Believer's Voice of Victory magazine, I encourage you to go to kcm.org. You'll be glad you did. I did. Until next time, bye-bye for now.
Jesus is the answer.